Okay, here we go again. Welcome to KUDEN Radio. Daishihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts and OnlineNinjaAcademy.com. Here with Sensei Alexander, just coming out of this year's Daikomyosai weekend intensive. I'm actually drafting an email. James, I don't know if you heard this. During the weekend, I was telling some people that the email, the gist of the email is going to be, man, like, if I went to that seminar, I would be pissed, right? Especially if I was a technique collector, if I was trying to check off the boxes and whatever. You did 6 freaking techniques the entire weekend, and they're ones everybody knows. Yeah, except that, like, we were covering points within them that are in every technique or in some way, right? So, but I'm going to write it just to play around and wake people up, right? Because technique collectors would absolutely be pissed. But since I'm not, and the people that were there are not, well, they weren't pissed. So we had a good time, right? Anyway, all right. So it's going to sound like we're staying on this whole nin idea, but like everything comes from and goes back to, just like everything in our taijutsu comes from and returns to Ichimonji no Kamae. Okay? Hatsumi Sensei has always said, if you can't do Ichimonji no Kamae, you can't do taijutsu. If you can't do yokoruki, you can't do henka. If you can't do ashibarai, right, with long staff, you can't do bojutsu. Right? And I know they sound like really simplified terms or simplified things, but it can take a long time to get your head wrapped around what that actually means, right? Once you start, and I did this too, right? This is not me on a pedestal, but once you start, or once you stop parroting back what the teacher said, and stop quoting from simplified translations. We're going to talk about one of those, and it'll be expanded on here later in the week, and actually continue to peel back layers upon layers upon layers and to go deeper into things instead of playing a game of accumulation. Okay. What I mean by that, and as a perfect example of this, is before we get started, right? For decades, right? Now, I mean, I've been in this art since late 1980, early 1981. Depends on which seminar time frame you want to work by. So I've been around for a couple of weeks. But I've been studying, I've been training, right? I've been reflecting on just this one concept. I mean, obviously I've done more things than that, but this one concept that's at the crux, right? I'm talking about this, right? This nin, right? Or shinobu, okay? On what perseverance and endurance, what they're actually pointing to, okay? Because it can seem awfully simple, and it's taken to be awfully simple, right? And again, just kind of what I was talking about there, for a long time, there was a contradiction that bothered me, right? Even if I didn't always have the language for it, even if I didn't have the words to kind of explain it, just like when I bumped into ninjutsu, right? I was a military cop, and I had been going through martial arts since junior high school, right? 1975. I joined the military in 80. I joined it in early 80, right? Delayed entry, and then went in 81. I had been, because of my background, because of home life and street life and all that kind of stuff, right? I knew what I was very intimately familiar with violence and danger, and so I knew what I was looking for, and so I went through probably a third of the Encyclopedia of Martial Arts, trying this one, trying that one, and just kind of accepting that, like, okay, but this isn't exactly like it is on the street. It's not exactly like, right? And then I found ninjutsu, and like prior to that moment, right? For those of you who are in on the Daikomyo Sai weekend, that 0 point, right? Up to that moment before I read a definition or I read an example of and had a name to put on it, I didn't know it had a name, right? And that changed everything, right? Because now I could look into things, right? But I didn't always have language for this thing. Okay. On one hand, right, nin is almost always explained as endurance, patience, perseverance, right? Holding on through hardship. It's almost a grit and bear it, willpower, I will not be crushed kind of thing, right? But on the other hand, when we talk about the qualities of a tatsujin, right, a human being developed to their fullest potential, and a tatsujin having this ability, right? It's at the core. We use words like calm, natural, unforced, right? Even effortless. I remember thinking, how can endurance and effortlessness possibly belong to the same path? How could they possibly exist in the same realm? Because they seemed like opposites, like somebody who's doing hardstyle karate and then trying to learn aikido. Right? I just it didn't click, right? Because endurance sounds like strain. Effortlessness sounds like ease. Right? So for a long time, I assumed that effortlessness must be something reserved for very high levels, right? Some distant realm of ninpo that only a few ever touch, right? What I didn't understand then, and what became clear only much later by continuing to just keep revisiting this, right, is that it wasn't a contradiction at all, right? The problem wasn't with the concept. The problem wasn't with the term. The problem was with my definition of it, my understanding of it, right? It was a difference in perspective. And this can be seen even within ninja clans, ninja families, and the different types of ninja and how each one would relate to this, right? At the Geinin level, the one everybody fantasizes about, wall climbing, disappearing in puffs of smoke, swords, blowguns, throwing stars, all that kind of stuff, right? At that level, nin does feel like endurance, right? Because life is inefficient. Energy is wasted, structure collapses easily, that kind of thing, right? At the Chunin level, the level of the middleman, right? Nin becomes about managing energy, right? Learning when to engage, when to avoid, when to escape, right? When to wait, right? Managing people, leveraging networks, those kind of things, right? Getting other people to do things. And at the Jōnin level, see, that's where something shifts. So I was taught a long time ago, right? Hatsumi Sensei, as a Jōnin, could only teach people how to be Jōnin. Now, whether they rise to that occasion or they try to reconcile everything with the movie image, he can't do anything about that. Right? But something definitely shifts at the Jōnin level. Because nin stops being about enduring everything and becomes about not creating unnecessary hardship in the first place. Right? Effort doesn't disappear. Right? We don't become lazy. We don't become passive, whatever, right? What disappears is wasted effort. Right? And here's the part that really changed how I saw all of this. What I once thought was an esoteric, high-level ninja principle, I came to see in a way where it was actually woven into everyday life, right? In the regions where ninpo developed, around Togakushi, right? In mountain communities shaped by weather, terrain, scarcity, survival. Right? People didn't endure by suffering bravely. They endured by not fighting what didn't need to be fought, by conserving energy, by choosing correctly, by not crossing every bridge, by not stepping into every storm or down every back alley. In other words, what I thought was advanced nin was actually life intelligence. And that brings us directly into tonight's episode, because nin is not about enduring pain. It's not grit, bear it, force through with willpower. Right? It's about enduring long enough, right? Enduring that kaname, that crux, that critical moment where most people would quit, right? To get to the point, right, for choice, for options, to return. And once you understand that, endurance and effortless are no longer opposites at all. They're the same truth seen from different levels. Right? So that and more when we get back.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio. Real training for real people in a real world.
All right. James, are you back there? That's Alan Miller here, back from Warrior Concepts, and I've got Sensei Alexander in the wings. Hopefully he's not having a glitch. Are you there? Hello? Hello? One ringy dingy, two ringy dingy. No. Ta-da! Oh, wait. He was there. Wait. Dude, it's not April Fool's. Not yet. Okay, so control yourself. Pace yourself. I know. Anyway, how's it sound so far?
Good.
Okay, awesome. So I'm not having that little glitchy thing. All right, awesome. I think that's the gist, right? Reset the technology before we have to use the technology, especially for something like this that's resource intensive. All right, cool. So who do we have on? Sporting my dojo training T-shirt. Just one of them has a nin on the front, right? This one has the 9 schools on the back. It says 9 paths, 1 goal. I think. I can't see it from here. Anyway, yeah.
So far, we got Dave, Kyle, Maury, and Victor. Victor said sorry to have missed the seminar.
Dude, I get it, right? I get it. Life is life. Yeah. I still love you, so it's okay. It's all good. Especially you, right? You're a killer with a sword. I love you. I love you. And he's from New York. Don't let the fact that he lives in Florida, change anything, right? Because, you got that sound. Anyway, all right, cool beans. Before I forget, I'm still trying to catch up. I did post a general post on Facebook, thanking everyone who sent in like birthday wishes and all those kind of things. I'm trying to catch up on 170 just on my personal profile, and they're on a couple of other places too. So I'm trying to get through and at least hit the little like thing so you know that I got yours, kind of thing. But yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I am absolutely grateful for having this many positive, powerful, productive people, right, in my life. That's cool, right? I appreciate it. So kind of paraphrase what I put in that little post. It's not about me. I get the sentiment, and I get what we do it, right? It's kind of a birth anniversary. Right? It's your birthday. I had one of those. 63 in a couple of days, 63 years and a couple of days ago. It's an anniversary. It just celebrates another revolution around the sun. It's all good. My hope is that everybody continues to light up your little corner of the world, even just a little bit. Because if we all did that, how bright of a place would this world be? Okay, so either way, thanks. I appreciate it. Okay. Anyway, anything else, James? Anybody else?
No, sir. Not right now.
Okay, cool. All right. So in that case, I got a lot. I'm going to jump right into this. So let's do it. All right. So again, today's episode comes from something I'm going to call very quiet, right? Something most people walk past without ever really seeing. They might see it when it's brand new. They might see it if it jumps out at them in a catalog or in a martial arts magazine or, I don't know, something like that, right? A post on Facebook. We were just talking about this the other day. James, I know you and I were talking about it, and I mentioned it to students. One of the reasons why there's a kanji in the logo is not just because a lot of people know what this kanji is. And see, that's the thing, right? We our awareness is on different levels, and what draws us to things is also not only on different levels, but coming from different places. This is not woo-woo. This is neurobiology. This is neuroplasticity. This is brain science. Okay. So yes, this is conveying one of the core concepts, right? Nin, enduring, persevering, patience, those kind of things. But one of the biggest reasons this is a part of the logo is because people in this art, right? Most of the people that come to us for training or get involved in this kind of thing will break their freaking necks if they even think they caught a kanji out of the corner of their eye, right? On a t-shirt, on a poster. James, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. I'll accept it because you're the bearer of truth in the universe. But
Definitely not wrong.
we're not wrong, right? We all do it. I do it, right? Just like we can't pick up a freaking pole of any, buy a new freaking shower rod, buy a new curtain rod, whatever, right? And it doesn't even get out of the freaking package before we're like doing some staff stuff with it, and right? It's just we can't help ourselves. So anyway, right? If anyone has seen, or any of you, and I know a lot of you have, seen the new dojo coming along, right? Over the Christmas break, we did more renovations and whatnot, and I wasn't happy with. Normally, we for the kamiza, right? I put up paneling, 2 sheets of paneling, and the kamiza is supposed to create a point in the room that naturally draws attention, right? It is the central focal point of the dojo because it represents the lineage, it represents different things that we're working on and whatnot. So I have always used a very dark, contrasting paneling, right? I know it's very 1970s. You know what? I don't hear that from anybody, considering that they've been drawn to something that's very, I don't know, 13th century Japan, right? Well, that's different, Sensei. Yeah, okay. Call it what you want. Anyway, nothing was really jumping out at me, and I put myself under a deadline, time constraint, that kind of thing, and I had to get the kamiza back up. Right, it had been 5.5, almost 6 months since the fire. A little bit less than that. It took us about 6 weeks to find a new place. Moving back in, getting this thing set up, had to do it, right? So we had these shoji screens that had to be adjusted in length because the ceiling's lower in this place and those kind of things. So, but I refashioned them, and so the contrast is with shoji. But what I did is I have this scroll that I'm sure most people would recognize, right? At least the main character on it. But it's this old scroll, picked it up years ago. And so I decided I was going to put it right down, hang down underneath the kamidana, under the shelf, centered, because the shoji, they're two big shoji and they come together, and symbolically they're like doors. Okay. So you can imagine them sliding open, right? And we step into Narnia. No, I mean, we step on the path, right? Or the lineage empties there. So I put this right there, and has a very large nin kanji, shinobu, right? Big kanji, right? And then the poem, since it's this older thing, it's written from top to bottom, right to left. It's just two lines, and then there's a little signature line kind of thing. Typical of these things. Not literal, right? The way it's written, it's Sino-Japanese. So even though the Japanese use it, it comes from traditional Chinese as well. And between the two translations, a lot comes out, but it's not written to be read like normal sentences. Okay, it's a certain type of art form where concepts are arranged, and you're supposed to peel back layers, look at things and whatnot. So, but again, it has this large nin character at the top, right? And then there's a short poem. Okay. And again, this is nothing new. It's not like I contracted for it or anything. You've probably seen it or one very much like it hanging in dojo all over the world, right? And not just in ninjutsu, right? This is very commonplace, both inside and outside the realm of ninjutsu, right? Because people know that big character means, they know what it means, right? So what I want to do is I want to kind of break this down a little bit. I want to take a look at it, and then we're going to peel back some layers for this one, okay? Because as many of you know, right, all the regulars know, I've been approaching things from the Jōnin level for a while, and it's going to be my focus, right? The Jōnin level of ninpo, right, which automatically by default includes ninjutsu, nippo taijutsu, budo taijutsu, right? But if we come at it the other way, those things don't necessarily include the things above them, right? Same thing works in Mikyo. But either way, right? Take a look at this and see how this poem actually points to. Okay? It's not that we don't have to endure pain sometimes. It's not that we don't have to endure hardship sometimes. Okay. But it's not the way most people approach it. Because the way most people approach it, I know the way I approached it for a long time, right? It created exhaustion, right? A lot of people burn out, right? Because you can only push into the storm for so long before you just fucking run out of energy, right? So, anyway, so again, there's slight variations of these things. Sometimes they're written slightly different, but the meaning is exactly the same. Okay, so and there's even a difference in pronunciation depending on whether you use the on reading or the kun reading of the kanji and whatnot. Okay, as far as Japanese goes, but my phonetic rendering of this poem is Ninichi Fuhei Namayoshi Rin Sanbun Tame Tenku. Cool, right? My best butchered Japanese. Okay. Again, different scrolls compress or stylize this. But again, this is a classical style Sino-Japanese construction. Right? It's not modern Japanese grammar. Okay? And that matters. It's really important. Okay. This isn't conversational Japanese. Okay. It's classical phrasing using Chinese characters, right? So it's meant to be interpreted, not read word for word, right? So I'm not getting into a pissing contest with somebody who wants to get into like nitpicking this or that or whatever. Okay. This is interpretive, right? And I'm coming at this from a rough literal meaning first, and then we'll explore things. Okay. So if we kind of take a look at the kanji and meanings and whatnot at the most basic level, okay, from the Japanese, the Ninichi Fuhei Namayoshi, that side, so the right hand side of the scroll, right, going from top to bottom, and you can't miss it because not only is there a big nin symbol, the first character on the right column is nin, and then under that there's the kanji for one, ichi. Okay, so very, very rough, very literal meaning. Enduring one time, the wind and waves. Okay, wouldn't it be cool if you only had to deal with like wind and waves and dangerous shit once, then like tick it off your box and go about your life? That'd be awesome. Okay, lots of people are pissed off because life doesn't work that way, but anyway, right? So, and then the next column to the left, right? The little column far over, that's an artist's signature kind of thing, right? So the next line it just means 3 minutes of the heavens. What? Right? So if we switch things a little bit, right, and we look at it from a traditional Chinese perspective, right? Because again, remember the Japanese are borrowing kanji, right? They're originally Chinese, right? So from a, again, rough, literal, traditional Chinese meaning, what we're looking at is a moment of patience will bring calm, right? And then the left column is let 3 parts of the sky broaden. Again, what? So anyway, right? We'll get that out of the way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at each of these kanji because they're not chosen at random. And again, it's not meant to be read like you're reading a book. Okay? It's meant to be interpreted. Okay? So you look at the kanji, and certain kanji combinations are going to do certain things. Okay? For instance, in the right-hand column, the very first kanji is enduring, right? But the next two, right, ichiji, right, mean one time or can mean one time, right? On the other side, right, sambun, right, 3 minutes. What we have to understand is that, and I'll talk about this later as well, these are not numerical counters. Okay? It's not about 1 and 3 any more than Nanakorobi Aoki, right? The formula for success, 7 times down, 8 times up, are not about 7 and 8. It's about getting your ass back up one more time than you've fallen to achieve success, to keep going. Right? So there's a meaning behind it, but it's compressed. Right? So that little piece is important, but that happens throughout the poem. Right? So again, what most people know, nin, right? Shinobu, to endure, to persevere. It also means to restrain, as in restraining oneself. It also means to bear inwardly, right? Not going around bitching and moaning to everybody as though if you do it, somebody will save me, right? It can also mean to conceal or to hold back, right? It's not passive suffering. It's controlled restraint. Ooh. Right? It's like that nin-tai kanji that I have hanging up at the dojo that can be translated also as nin, right? But It's just two kanji. But the depth of the meaning is enduring, persevering, is challenging. It's painful. So the ultimate ability, right, is to be able to endure the act of enduring. Right? Not resentfully. Right? So the next two characters actually go together. I talked about this, right? There's the kanji ichi, right? And the next character is ji, right? Which is a time indicator. Okay. So ichiji, okay, can be translated as one time. It can be translated as one moment. It can also be translated, not translated, but seen as, used to represent a critical interval, a critical moment, a decisive instant. Right? Hatsumi Sensei has used the term kaname. Right? It's a pivotal moment, a pivotal point, crux, the center of a technique. Right? This past weekend during Daikomyosai, we were looking at, and I used the terminology based on how the Gyoko-ryu would look at it, but this is in Tagagi, Yoshino-ryu, Shinden, Furo-ryu, Togakure-ryu, right? I summed it up as the 0 point of resistance, and it's actually the moment before nin is necessary. The moment before the action occurs, the moment before the strength locks in, the moment before action occurs. Okay? It's the opportunity before you have to duck and cover. There's a lot of power in that moment. Okay? And we looked at 7 specific ones that can really, I mean, you can see it in kata and techniques and all that, but I added an 8th one. And the 8th one, actually, to me, is number 1, but I put it at number 8 because I didn't want it to lose its punch. Yes, pun intended. Okay. And that is the 0 point that occurs before somebody gets involved in training, before they see a new technique, right? Or before they've seen the demonstration, the teacher demonstrated something, and before they can put a label on it, right? Because that moment is the moment where we decide what the training is about, what the point of ninjutsu is, how we define things, right? Because that will determine where our training goes. Right? It's all causality. It's all cause and effect. So if we get it right, we honor the lineage, we learn the lessons, we're open to things, that kind of thing. We get it wrong, we end up in a very different place. We still have skills, right? One way to get it wrong is to assume that this is the same as every other fighter system. So guess what? Everything you develop will be fight skills, which will have a time limit on them because we are aging. I just turned 63. Right? My wall climbing days, my vaulting days, that kind of stuff, pretty much limited. Not that I can't if highly motivated, right? But I'm not doing it every day. Right? Those days are going away, right? Just like they will for everyone. Right? But this ichiji, right? It's not about clock time. Right? G is related to, like, we would think of it as the o'clock part, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, that kind of thing. Right? It's not clock time. Right? This is the moment where outcome pivots. Okay? This is that critical moment. All right, we'll take a look at this here in a bit. Right? The next kanji is the kanji for kaze or fu, right? Wind. Right? Most people know that from like the Godai, those kind of things, right? But wind, this same kanji also represents forces. It also is used to mean circumstances and also unseen pressure. Uh, the next kanji after that should be familiar to anybody that has been around long enough and seen, even if you're just reading the English, right, of kanji, kamae names and things like that, and the kanji are right there. Okay, so that kanji is the kanji he or taira, right? Calm, level, settled, evened out. Okay? And this is where that kanji, he or taira, right, stops being a definition and starts becoming a practice. Because this kanji is the same one used in hira, of hira no kamae. Okay? So this would be a good time. We'll get back to the kanji here in a minute. Right? I don't want to wear people out and make this sound like it's some kind of academic language class or something like that. Right? So before we go any further, I want to give you a quick frame for where this conversation is going this week. Right? For those of you who've been around for a while, you know that I pick a theme. And so we've got something for KUDEN, and then something from that gets translated for the strategies and tactics that underpin and make the physical stuff work, right? So it runs KUDEN, Whiteboard Wednesday, Friday Masterclass, right? And for my inner circle students, for my mastery and elite students, even in your coaching classes, right? So you guys know how it just keeps expanding and expanding and going deeper and deeper. Okay. So what we're talking about today, right? Nin, hira no kamae, alignment, and the return of choice isn't just a philosophical idea. I keep hearing weird noises in the background. What is going on? Don't know if James is having some. James, you having some issues on that side, or am I having issues on my side?
I think it was just on my side.
Okay, fair enough. I hear beeping and binging noises and whatnot, and then I think that we're having problems. All right, so okay, so again, not just a philosophical idea. Okay, this is the crux, the kaname, the pivotal point of the whole thing. Right, this poem and Jōnin level stuff, Oku-den level stuff, right? So it's something we're going to unpack and apply across the rest of the week, right? So just the heads up, on Wednesday, right, for our Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday training, I'll be breaking this down from a strategic perspective, right? How hira no kamae functions as the calm within the storm, right? Which is really important for people to get their head wrapped around, because hira no kamae, unless people are doing classical training and doing kata training and whatnot, when I see people doing randori, when I see people doing, call it sparring, call it whatever you want, hira no kamae is like the discardable kamae. Like, nobody fights that way, so that makes no sense, right? Unless you want to be a target, doesn't make any sense. Okay, again, if we translate this stuff from a fighter's mentality, then sure, why not? Okay, but hira, during Whiteboard Wednesday, I am taking hira through multiple levels of not just transition, but maturation. Right, as we mature, as our skills build and whatnot, hira no kamae becomes more and more powerful without changing, until eventually it ends up. I mean, at one point, it becomes a shield, not for you, for the thing you're protecting. At another point, it becomes a double-bladed seigan without changing the kamae. At another point, it returns to shizen, but the part of it that makes hira, this this taira, right, this concept, this kaname, that stays. So it looks like we're standing in shizen, but in that context, in that moment, it's not Shizen. It's Hira no Komai. Okay? But again, Hira is the calm within the storm. And this is how structure, not force, is what brings clarity and options back online, I guess would be a good way to say it. Okay? And then we're going to follow up on Friday, right? In Friday's masterclass, we're going to take this into the physical application, how posture, distance, and movement either escalate situations unnecessarily or prevent them from ever becoming fights in the first place, or if it does go physical, we've actually influenced the attacker in a way where he thinks he's full on, but we've actually affected him in a way where he's not coming at us with the level of intent and whatnot that he could, because he's decided he doesn't need that much. Okay. One of my teachers used to describe this like using the volume knob on an old-fashioned radio, right? If we do the right things, okay, that volume knob represents the energy, intention, commitment, and whatnot of an attacker. Okay? If we do the right things and we understand how to strategically and tactically control a situation, we can get him to turn the volume down because he just determined that he doesn't need that much. If we do the wrong things, if we throw gasoline on the fire, we might as well have just reached over ourselves and cranked that up as high as it'll go. Okay? So, again, I'm going to take it into physical application, posture, distant movement, all that kind of stuff, right? So, as you listen to this episode, don't just hear this as theory, right? I want you to listen for very specific things. I want you to listen for where storms get created, where structure collapses, and where a single adjustment changes everything. Okay? Because this week isn't about learning more. It's about learning how to stop creating problems that don't need to exist. Okay? So, carrying on. The next kanji is the character for Nami, as in Uranami, ocean wave, tsunami, tidal wave, right? So, on a very simple level, right, Nami means waves. It's in the poem, right? If we look at it really rough and literally, sure. But Nami, this kanji, also means turbulence. It also means disruption. Okay? The next kanji is the kanji shizu, or se, right? And it means quiet. It means still. It means settled. Right? So together, these last couple of kanji, right? It's actually a classical idiom, meaning wind calmed, waves stilled. What that means is chaos has passed, right? It's the calm after the storm, right? When you start wringing out our clothes and stuff, right? Next kanji, now we're over in the left column, very first kanji at the top, rin, right? Rin means to face, to approach, to stand at the edge of, to arrive at a moment, right? This is situational. It's not abstract. Okay? The next two kanji, sanbun, right? Kanji san, kanji un, in this case, it's converted to bun, right? Very simply, right? 3 parts, 3 measures, 3 minutes, but it also together, right? Just like what I have there, ichiji, right? 1 time, 1 minute, whatever. It's a pivotal moment. It's a important moment. It's an important piece, right? This is the same thing, right? This also represents and is a way to say or to discuss a threshold, right? A decisive fraction, a moment where freedom can take place, okay? Because of choices, right? I'm not sure. I think I mentioned this in a previous KUDEN. I mentioned it again over the weekend. But if we go through the numbers based on the way people normally discuss the number of choices that they have, right? People often say, "I didn't have a choice," right? You didn't have a choice. You had zero choices. Yeah, I had zero choices, right? No. Only dead people have zero choices. Okay, what you really mean is you only had one choice. Okay, it's either because you've limited yourself to only having one, kind of like the salmon that swim upstream, okay, to spawn, right? Why do they do that? Well, they don't know anything better. They don't know anything else. Okay, so they fight the waves, they fight the rocks, they go from salt water to fresh water, which is actually poisonous to saltwater fish, just like salt water is to freshwater fish. And they fight that. They get beaten against the rocks. There are bears along the path, right, along the banks, waiting for them. All that kind of stuff, right? But they're conditioned by instinct. Okay, most die on the way. And those who do make it to spawn die on the way back because they die of exhaustion, beaten against the rocks, eaten, whatever, right? They don't know anything different. Okay, but somebody who only has one choice, either because of internal or external obligation, command, anything like that, right? That's slavery. We know how bad that is, okay? But we don't need anybody else to enslave us. If we believe that we only have one choice, we have no choices, which is really one, right? Because only dead people, right? Then we're enslaved. We don't have to be enslaved by somebody else. We can be enslaved by our own belief system. Okay. If we have two choices, that's called what? It's called a dilemma. Okay. I don't know which one to pick, right? That's internal conflict. Okay. It's only once we arrive at a position where we have three or more choices in that given moment do we enter or begin to enter the realm of freedom, or at least what feels like freedom. Okay. Because we have more choices. We have more options. Okay. And so here's this sambun, right? In that one moment, if I can make it to that, if I can make it to and through that one moment, mind calms, body relaxes, perspective opens up, and I can see choices, not limitations. Right? Everything changes. Okay? Next kanji is the kanji tame, sometimes just pronounced i, right? Means to become, to serve as, to result in, right? Or to transform into. And then the final two are the kanji for ten and ku or q, right? So tenkyu, tenku, right? This is translated as the heavens, but it's also translated as the open sky or a vast expanse or unlimited space. Okay. So even when it's translated as heavens, right, it's not heaven in a religious sense, right? It means openness. It points to horizon. Like, look how far you can go, right? It points to possibility, possibilities. Okay. So I told you what the very, very rough transliteral or transliteration is, just reading the bare minimum here, right? But a more smooth, but still rough literal translation, right? What might sound like the nin is right there, right at the top, right? Endure or restrain, right? For one critical moment. And then when the wind settles and the waves become still, standing at the threshold, three measures open into the vast sky. Right? Again, that's rough. It's a literal it's a rough literal rendering, not poetic yet, just structural. Okay. And then if we smooth it out a little bit more, but still staying with the literal, still honest to it, right? It might help if I were to say, if one can endure for a critical moment, the winds calm and the waves settle, and at that decisive threshold, threefold freedom opens into limitless space. Okay, so we're still inside the kanji, right? But we're staying away from a deeper understanding that's translating it, right, or more the philosophy behind it. Okay, and again, remember what I said about three, right? Threefold freedom, right? We've got some options. Okay, so again, because this is classical phrasing using Chinese characters, the Japanese and Chinese renderings reinforce each other rather than contradict. Okay, and both point to the same principle. And that's the point, the principle. Okay, because this whole poem points way past that whole, again, grit and bear it, willpower, right? The shit that makes New Year's resolutions fail. Okay. It talks about wind and waves. It talks about enduring a critical moment. Okay? So, what does that do? Well, the critical moment that it's pointing to, right? When the winds are howling, the waves are crashing, right? If we can endure to that moment where most people quit, we have opportunity that most people will never have. Right? So, what's interesting is that none of this talks about fighting, only timing, only restraint, and what becomes possible if structure doesn't collapse. This is where we're going with this episode. Okay. It talks about wind and waves. It talks about enduring a critical moment and about clear skies returning afterwards. Right? You know, this too shall pass. Yeah, it'll pass. Right? What are we going to be like after it passes? Because if we fought the wind and waves, when it passes, we're going to need a moment. Right? We're going to be fucking exhausted, if not dead. Okay? So, in a bit, we'll take a look at this from an Uda backside hidden perspective. Okay? It's not, I'm not going to be doing any kind of like philosophical woo-woo twisting of things. I'm actually going to take a look at the poem from right to left instead of left to right. But it's meant to be read right to left, right? Top to bottom. Right? Most people understand what this poem says, or at least what the kanji characters mean if they look them up, especially the big one at the top, right? And most people, literally, most people stop at seeing persevere, endure, right? Okay. People have to be careful when they try to get to the whole patience thing. I know I did, because for the longest time, I'm like, perseverance, endurance. I get that. Yeah. Patience. Well, isn't that the fucking opposite? Because I translated patience as waiting, as passive. Nin is not passive. I've covered that again and again over the last couple of weeks. Not passive. Okay? It's not aggressive either, but it is proactive. Okay? So again, there's slight variations to the poem, but the meaning is the same. Okay? So the one that's in my dojo translates literally, right? Just by reading the kanji, right? Enduring one time, the wind and waves, 3 minutes of heaven. right? But just because we can translate it, right? Okay. Far fewer understand why the poem is true, right? And that's what this episode's about. Okay. So before we get a little bit more clear on the omote reading, the obvious part, and then continue on from there, James, any questions or comments up to this point?
Just Jimmy said Kambama.
Well, that's not about Nin. Although I guess either he was patient or you were patient until you let me know about it, right? Like the Bansen Shukai is loaded with this stuff. Right? Everybody thinks the Bansen Shukai is, I did, right? This is not me on a pedestal, right? I did, right? I think it's just loaded with, gaining ninja tactics and stuff. That's more Shoninki, the Nippiden, about half and half, but the Bansen Shukai, that's an interesting bear. So anyway, also as a part of this, we're going to take a look at how this high level perspective wasn't just for ninja clans. Like this is embedded into an entire, the thinking of an entire region. Interesting, very interesting. I think so anyway. And if you're staying on board, well, I don't know, be interested, I guess. Right. So again, back to this poem. On the surface, right, the omote reading, the obvious, the what it looks like, right? The poem's very straightforward, right? There will be storms. There will be chaos. There will be moments when pressure is unavoidable. That's life, right? If you can endure that one critical moment, the point where most people break, clarity returns. Sky clears, the horizon opens. Okay? This isn't optimism, it's observation. Storms pass, but not everyone survives them intact. And that's where most interpretations stop. And that's important. Okay? We didn't have a glitch. I'll let you sit with that for a little bit. Okay. So here's the mistake. Here's where people misread Nin. Right? People hear this poem and think Nin means endure pain, be tough, white knuckle it, right? Against the wind, against the waves, right? Hang on, no matter what. That's not Nin. That's stubbornness. Endurance by itself produces exhaustion. Exhaustion produces collapse. You ever see somebody just keep going until, like runners, just hit a wall, bang, face plant, move some skin into their skin from their face into their underwear, right? Grinding through pressure is not mastery. You ever see somebody brand new on the job? If you've been on a job for a long time, or maybe you've been in the fight world or whatever, and I say that because I've got a new student that's joining, and she was a Muay Thai fighter for a long time. Cool stuff, right? And you see somebody new come along, right? And they're just grinding at it, right? Because they want to be somebody. They want to be a champion. I get it, right? Meanwhile, the champ has learned how to control their breathing. He's learned how to manage energy expenditure, right? He's learned to manage range, right? So they're not just throwing wild shit, hoping something lands, or they're not throwing wild stuff, showboating, right? Just leaking energy left and right. So when they fire off shots, they land, but more importantly, they can last more rounds. Okay. So right? Grinding through pressure is not mastery. It's just delayed failure. So the real question isn't, how do I endure the storm? The real question is, what kind of person, what kind of qualities, skills, and abilities does this type of person have? Right? What kind of person is able to endure that moment at all? Okay? Well, Sensei, they look like those action figures in the toy store, and yeah, that's not been my experience. Okay? Um, I've seen old, frail people on the outside endure way more. For instance, my wife is in the healthcare field. As a matter of fact, my ex-wife was a pharmacist. My lady before that was an LPN, so she was a nurse, right? So I've had some experience being in hospitals and seeing healthcare and all that kind of stuff. And what has never ceased to amaze me is the 97-year-old frail little old lady, broke a hip, did so, whatever, had surgery, is in, and the next freaking day, she's up, holding on to her IV pole, walking up and down the halls, slowly, wobble, whatever, right? Maybe needs some assistance, whatnot. Because she's not freaking laying around. She wants to get home. She's got shit to do. And then you got the 20-something guy talk shit to his friends all the time, had something minor done, way less than her, or maybe it was the same thing, right? And he's laying there, oh, yeah, sir, we need you to get up. We need you to move. We need you to walk, recovery, right? Can you just give me something for pain? Oh, it's just, and I'm not, this is not, this is not I saw it once. This is like very commonplace, right? So what is that kind of person? What are they like? It's not the image that most people have. Okay. So this is where the poem turns, okay? Because the Uda, the hidden question, right? Not in language, but in causality, right? About cause and effect. If we read it the other direction, the poem tells us what happens. The Uda asks why it happens, right? So the poem tells us, if I endure this moment, right? When the waves are crashing and the wind's just ripping around and all that kind of stuff, if I can get to that moment where the wind's calm, the ocean calms, options return, potential returns. Cool. That's the omote. Right? The poem itself, read normally, tells us what happens. But the Uda asks why it happens. Why does clarity return for some while others panic, freeze, or self-destruct? And the answer isn't strength, it's structure. Right? In our Module 1 training, in our curriculum, it's about the earth element, right? Not only is it there first because most people, when they come in, especially adults, not flexible, not athletic, whatever, right? So probably the attacker's going to already be on them, and they're going to have to hold the line. They might be cornered. They may be caught in an inopportune time, not be able to take up a fight posture, whatever, right? And so they're kind of stuck, right? But it's not just that. The key principle in that module is learning that strength is not based, for us, is not based on muscle and athleticism. It's based on structure and positioning. That is the only way for a smaller, weaker, slower defender to defend against somebody who is larger, stronger, faster, those kind of things, right? We can't beat them muscle for muscle. They already have more. We can't beat them speed for speed, right? This guy has already shown up with whatever those advantages are. We can't, I mean, you can wish and hope and pray, right? But it's not going to do anything, right? So ninjutsu is about how to be in that position where you're supposed to lose and understand clearly how things work and to apply those things in a way looks pretty freaking magical, except it's not. It's science, right? So again, the answer isn't strength. It's structure. Okay? In Ninpo, we call this Ikkan. When I first got involved in this martial art, we didn't open and close classes with what most people are used to, right? Shikin Hanamitsu Daikomyo. We opened and closed classes with Ninpo Ikkan. The way of the ninja is the way. The way of the ninja is the one way. It's I'll talk about this a little bit because I don't want to give it away just yet, right? It's called Ikkan. 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 Okay. Ikkan is a contraction of the words ichi kan. It's just the way the Japanese do things, right? Ikkan means the same thing. Okay. But it's not one way, as in like it's our style or our way of doing things as opposed to the way other styles do things. Okay. It's not that. It's not rigidity, right? My way or the highway. Okay. It's alignment with whole. H-O. Okay. Whole. It's the Japanese way of saying dharma. Okay. D-H-A-R-M-A, right? Dharma, truth, right? But it's not just that, it's natural law. Okay. Ikkan. Right? So Ninpo, the way of the ninja, Ikkan is the one way, is the way of nature, is the way of the universe. Right? It's not different. It's not fighting truth and reality, right? It's aligned with, and the more we can get ourselves aligned with those principles and concepts that govern reality, the less like the salmon we're going to be. Okay. So Ikkan, again, alignment with whole, right? With reality as it actually functions, not the way we think it would or should, right? If we had our own way and we were king or queen or whatever. Okay. My new joke with that is, people act like they want to be king, and I'll go, "Want to be king? Here, king. Here, king." Okay. Only when we embody humility and get over ourselves, or at least put ourselves on hold, can we approach some of this stuff. Because as long as we think that we know, or we're looking for a teacher who will tell us what we want to hear, then we're just going to hunt and peck at this stuff. Okay? So again, when you stop fighting the river, when you stop swimming upstream just to prove that your willpower, right? You could make it. What are you going to be like when you get there? Okay? But life doesn't become easy just because you fight harder. You just become more tired and you get older and more worn out, right? So when we get this right, when we get in alignment with whole, with Ikkan, with what that's pointing to, right? Life doesn't become easy. It becomes efficient. And efficiency over time feels like freedom. Okay? We'll come back to that in a minute. Okay? Because I used to, when I was describing this art and the goal and things like that, there was a series of 3 E's I used on a regular basis. Talk about that here in just a minute, but just check back with He Who Must Be Obeyed, my producer. James, questions, comments from you, from anybody?
No, I don't see anything.
Wow. Again, I either put them to sleep or I broke them. Shushy Whistler broke somebody over the weekend. It was yesterday, wasn't it? Broke Kyle.
It was.
Kyle couldn't function. And it wasn't because he got physically broken. He was laughing so damn hard. It was hilarious, right? So, I mean, I turned around. I'm like, holy shit, I really thought he was broken, didn't I? I turned around again. Shushy Whistler was teaching his segment. And wow. Anyway, those are good learning moments.
Mm.
All right. So, again, the deeper we go, and this is natural, this is nature. The deeper we go, right, the less we talk about how to do cool shit to break people so I can feel like the man, the more people that are going to drop off. Right? Lots of people have already turned off the podcast if they're listening in my future, right, to the audio only recorded version. Some are on the verge of it right now, right? Some may have just done it. Okay? Because this isn't what they want to hear. This is not what I signed up for. Okay, then go fucking do something you signed up for. Okay? But I would suggest that you're either to come back. Okay? They don't always, but a good percentage do. Okay? Because you're going to get too damn old and too damn tired to be able to do the He-Man, right, shit. It's not shit, right? Because, I mean, the fighters win sometimes. Okay? But how long can you keep that up? Okay? So this is where I want to introduce something I've used for years, right? And I think it's time to bring it back, right? I'm going to start using this way more often. Back in the day, it didn't matter if it was the way I described what we were doing and the focal point and whatnot of the training, and also this new me that we're aiming for, right? The Japanese word is tatsujin, right? Tatsu means fully developed, fully actualized, right? Like operating on all pistons kind of thing, right? And Jin is a person, okay? So a tatsujin is a fully actualized human being. It's a person operating to their fullest potential, okay? In all realms that they operate in. Okay? So there were 3 key traits or abilities or aspects of this person, of a tatsujin. Okay? We'll call them the 3 E's. Right? They're effective, they're efficient, and they look effortless. They look like they're not doing anything or they're not struggling. Everything looks easy. Okay? So, but here's the thing. Every system that survives is effective or it wouldn't exist. Okay? But effectiveness alone burns enormous amounts of energy. Brute force can be effective, right? The Japanese call it chikara kurabe, right? It's direct brute force, force on force, contest kind of thing, right? Burns an enormous amount of energy, right? It can be effective, right? Hell, panic can be effective. Desperation can be effective. Once, maybe twice, right? But efficiency is where Nin actually lives. Okay? Efficiency is energy conservation. And energy conservation is the primary rule of survival. He or she, and this is not just survival in the woods, whatever. This is warfare. This is anything, right? He or she or the army or whatever with the most resources at the end of the engagement wins. Right? That's why in war, We're not just out there throwing bullets at the other guy who's throwing bullets at us. We're dropping bombs on roads, railways, factories, right? We're cutting off food supplies, ammunition routes, whatever, because if we can starve the enemy in food, in energy, in supplies and whatnot, they run out of things, it's over. Okay? Whether they fight to the last man or they give up because they're starving to death, or they just run out of bullets and they got nothing. Okay? So it's energy conservation is the rule of survival. And the point of the Kihon Happo, for those who need references to techniques, right? The Kihon Happo, right? Or the Kihon, any Kihon Gata, right? The models teaching those basic techniques and whatnot are just not ideas for how to do things, right? They're pointing to efficiency. Right? What's the least I need to do to produce these results? Right? And folks over the weekend, over our Daikomyosai weekend, heard it again and again. If you, in ninjutsu, if you feel like you are working when you are executing on a technique, two things are true. One, you are. And two, you're wrong. You can still do the thing, but it's not ninjutsu. Okay? So just because you put the guy down on the ground, don't confuse winning that or accomplishing the task with ninjutsu, with ninpo. Okay? Efficiency is energy conservation. So can we be effective and be efficient? Right? Minimal friction, no wasted motion, physical, emotional, or psychological. Okay? Efficiency provides choice under pressure. People see me do this in class, right? I'm in the middle of things. He's all tangled around me and whatnot, and I have a lock on him, and I wave across the room. I can move either arm, right? I can walk and step. I can kick, those kind of things. I'm not locked down, right? Because I have to neutralize him fighting back. I have to neutralize his resistance. Nope. My structure and my position takes care of that. Did it always? No, these were hard-won lessons. Okay. It's much easier to just struggle through things. And I know how that sounds like a contradiction, but it is, because some people don't want to do this type of training. They don't want to do the understanding part. They don't want to have to think. Just tell me where to put my foot, sensei. Otherwise, I'm going someplace else where they will. All right, put your foot right there. Then the technique fails. Well, you told me to put my foot right there. Well, based on your positioning the last time and based on his structure and your structure, that's where your foot went. But you don't want to learn how to determine where your foot goes based on the lessons. You just want to have a set way to do it all the time, and everything's supposed to work out. And that's why shit doesn't always work out. Okay? So, again, efficiency preserves choice under pressure. Okay? And when efficiency, the way that we do things, becomes habitual, it's the way we do everything. As soon as we get a new task, right? We figure we learn how to do it and stuff like that, right? And the brain, right? The ninja's mind, the Tatsujin's mind, immediately begins to find not shortcuts to get it done faster. That's a byproduct, right? That's a symptom, right? But efficiency, how do I cut down on how many times I need to go to the supply box? How many times, or how do I rearrange things so I don't put something in place and then I have to lift it up to put the other piece in? We're looking for patterns, right? When that kind of thinking, that kind of strategic thinking becomes habitual, effortlessness begins to appear. Okay? And when I say effortless, I don't mean somebody's being lazy. I don't mean they're looking for a way out, just like what I was talking about with the efficiency. I'm not looking to cheat to do good enough so I don't get fired, right? Or get get kicked out the door or whatever. It's not that. Right? it's about how do I get things done with the least amount of wear and tear on me in the process, right? Energy conservation. So when I'm done with work, I've got lots of energy left over to hang out with the grandson, to hang out with the dogs, to hang out with my wife who is undiagnosed ADD, and we end up doing a lot. Right? So how do I keep the batteries charged in the process of doing the work? Okay. And again, this is where effortlessness begins to appear. Okay. Not because nothing is being done, but because nothing is being wasted. Time isn't being wasted. Effort isn't being wasted. Right. Getting tied up in things that we just waste psychological energy and just put undue strain on things. Okay. The effort is still there. It just disappears from view. Okay. Just like earlier, I talked about the new guy on the job just running around and all that kind of stuff. And the professional, the guy that's been on the job for a while, is like, dude, just chill. Right. And we just put things in this order. Right. Yeah. But they just gave us 2 other things to do and they want it done by the end of the day. How do we do the stuff we're normally supposed to do and that stuff? Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to rearrange these things. I'm going to do this part. You're going to do that part, right? And we're going to get done half an hour early and have time for 2 extra smoke breaks. Oh, is that possible? Just follow along. Okay. So when somebody has this stuff down, it looks like they're doing nothing. It looks like their partner is falling down for them. That's why the Bushido guys, the Bullshido guys, don't think this shit works. Because they're coming at it with a fighter mindset. Everything they think about is focused on being inside the bubble and having to duck things and land things. And see, that's their definition of what will and won't work in a fight. But they've created or prevented the development of conditions that make it necessary to fight that way to begin with. They believe that that's what a fight is, and that's how a fight is won. So they force themselves into a position where they have to fight that way. So when they say that what we're doing would never work in a fight, what they're really saying is what we're doing would never work in a fight the way they do it, because they can't see how that would work. And they're right. What we're doing won't work the way they do it. But the first trick is to not force ourselves into a position, right, through stubbornness or ignorance or whatever, to have to fight that way. That's not the ninja way. Right? There've been all these freaking TV shows and whatever about how ninja would do things and they're going up against somebody and it's about the weapons and it's about the tactics and all that. No. No, a battle will never happen. Right? In the most overt way, the way most people think of ninja, right? The night or the day before, the ninja just figures out where the freaking enemy is camped. And in those days, you're always near a water supply because they didn't have the technology to haul that kind of stuff around, which means they're next to a stream or a river. Fantastic. We just go upstream and drop some poison in the water. They're going to be drinking from that. They're going to be bathing from that. They're going to be filling their canteens from that. They're going to be feeding that to their horses. There won't be a battle tomorrow. Might we have to? Yeah. That's why we have some of the techniques we do, but then the techniques are embedded with the same principles and concepts. Yes, they're effective, but they're effective because they're efficient and because they look effortless, right? Because we understand the science of how to take apart another human body, the science of how to keep my body, even when I'm the smaller one, the weaker one, the older one, the old fat bald guy one, right? In positions of strength and forcing him through positioning, influence, right? To force him to come at me and have to operate from positions of weakness. Joints are open and extended, right? And he feels muscles firing, and that feel means he is working. He's putting power in, except that he's operating from joints that are not aligned for strength. So yeah, he feels like he's working because he is, right? And I'm keeping my joints closed and in positions where it generates strength and positioning and leverage very, very easily, right? And then if I apply strong points to weak points, a weak point that he can't develop, guard, whatever, right? Well, that's cheating. No, only in your world. Okay? This is survival. This is not a contest. If you need to do things for bragging rights, you're already not cut out to be a ninja. That's not an insult. That's just truth. Somebody who needs attention and bragging rights can't operate in a realm doing things where no one knows because they need people to know. That's not a slight. That's recognition. Okay? So, this is the ura of the poem. Right? The ura of the poem is if I operate a certain way, keeping myself free and open so I have choice, weathering storms become very, very easy. If I understand where the critical moment is, the critical point, then I prepare for that moment. I do things and control conditions, okay? Like I don't stand out in the fucking open when an avalanche is coming. Right? Well, that sounds obvious. Yeah, I know, but people do it all the time. They get into pissing contests with people at work that then, because they have anger management problems or whatever, and I always tell my students, right? I understand having to defend yourself. So I get it. Okay. But if through the use of your words, your facial expressions, your hand gestures, your attitude, whatever, you triggered that thing, that's not self-defense anymore. That's universal justice. Okay. Well, he threw the first punch. He started it. No, he threw the first punch, but you started it. Because some people don't give a shit about the law, and some people haven't learned to just write off other people who are assholes. They're going to punch him in the face. Even Hatsumi Sensei said, we live in a sad time. We live in a sad world where you can't teach somebody a lesson who seriously deserves it. Because that's the warrior way. Some people didn't get that memo. That's why respect is our first line of self-defense. Don't give anybody a reason to want to punch your freaking lights out. Then you're only ever going to have to use these physical skills against people who are going to attack you no matter how nice you are. No matter what. Because that's about them and their karma. Right? All right, Sensei, what you're talking about is being ready for things to happen. No, being ready is a feeling. People say it all the time. I don't think I'm ready to start martial arts classes yet, or I think I'm ready to test for my next belt, or I think I'm ready to get married, or I think I'm ready to have kids, and then it happens. They're like, oh shit, I thought I was ready. No. We don't train to be ready. We train to be prepared. That's how you weather storms. That's how you get past that point that everybody else would drop off. Because you're prepared mentally, physically, skill-wise, right? Emotionally. Okay. So again, if we read the poem from cause, not effect, right? From the omote side, the obvious side, right? We endure, the storm passes, clarity returns. Okay? Cause and effect, right? But that's the cause, right? Ura, alignment, allows us to be efficient. Efficiency allows endurance without collapse. Enduring without collapsing, clarity never fully disappeared. Right? Even in the thick of things. There's no tunnel vision, that kind of stuff, right? I mean, there is some because it's just neurological and physiological, but not to the same extent that people get involved in, okay? The poem describes the outcome. The 3 E's explain why that outcome is possible. Because we are not just effective, we are effective through efficiency. And efficiency allows for things to get done more easily. And to look, at least to outsiders, when it actually feels effortless to us, to outsiders, it can seem like magic, right? But that is not Genin thinking. That is Jōnin level thinking. That is Oku-den, right? Shoden scrolls, Chuden scrolls, Oku-den. Not advanced, not secret, where we got clear with our perspective and we got the hell out of our own way. Okay? So we'll continue on with this in just a minute here because I got a lesson from a teacher a long time ago that points to this from a goal and priority perspective. Okay? But took me a long time because it was just something I quoted, right? Ninja does this, and then if they can't do that, they do this, and if they can't do that, they do this, and right. But to understand it and to understand the why, not just from one perspective, but from both the omote and the ura. Right? It's like the yin yang, right? It's not two things. It looks like two extremes, but it's one symbol because they're both operating at the same time. Just like if you're turning a long staff, right? Is the tip rising or dropping? Right? For those of you watching, right? I'm turning it this way. Is the tip rising or dropping? The answer is both. Okay. If you're only paying attention to what's going on out here, I'm doing a lifting strike. Yeah, what's his tip doing back there? Okay. As soon as I get that, then I understand that I don't have to do wild and crazy things. Once I deal with this guy and his friends coming up behind me, I can transition right from a lifting strike to a dropping strike because the stick is already doing both at the same time anyway. Right? And since that's the reality, if I just go along with what's going on and not fight the reality, right? Not do salmon jutsu, right? Shit gets easier. Okay. Anyway, James, questions, comments? Put everybody to sleep. We down to 0 people listening. No, we always have more people listening in the future than we do live. But anyway, what do we got?
Maury said, so energy conservation helps us to keep going in all areas of life. It's amazing how it all is connected.
Yeah, this isn't this people. The biggest disservice that people can do, but I understand how they have to in the beginning because they need an anchor point. And that is by calling this a martial art. Because martial, by its very nature, is about warfare. But if we can broaden that and look at it from the perspective of conflict, right? And it's not just about warfare, weapons and blood and all that kind of stuff. And it's dealing with any kind of conflict, right? Any kind of aggression coming at us. Psychological, emotional, verbal, yes, physical, that kind of stuff. And then we can transition this to conflict resolution, prevention of those kind of things, right? Then absolutely. This is, and when we say life, I get it because I use that a lot as an expedient because if I kept naming things, these things would get longer and longer and longer. And God knows a lot of people are already like, holy shit, you've been talking for how long? Right? Yeah, I know. But once we're done, then my wife gets upset because I don't talk. Right? Well, you have anything to say? Because I teach and I've been talking all fucking day long. I'm tired of the sound of my own voice. Okay? I don't say that to her that way. It's just nicer. But What we're really talking about is when we say life, right? These principles are universal. They don't belong to a martial arts style. They don't belong to martial arts. They're reflected a certain way in martial arts. They're reflected a certain way in Ninpo. Okay? But these are parenting ideas. These are leadership ideas. These are, recovering from injury ideas. These are how to not get injured, doing things ideas. These are managing the home so as to not, one of my favorite phrases is, we'll deal with that bridge when we get there. Maybe it's just because I'm old, but I have learned that there's lots of bridges you don't want to get to. Right? And even if you did, how do you know the bridge is in service when you get there? How do you know that what you have and need to cross the bridge with, the bridge will hold it? I'm using the bridge as a thing for anything people delay paying attention to. But the ninja, don't take those things for granted, right? Nothing doesn't matter. No thing doesn't matter. Right? Isn't that difficult to keep track of all that stuff up front? Trinity, my daughter, she works for a company that does these different things and whatnot. And she has this new position now where they want her to do data tracking and all that kind of stuff from these different events that they do, and then the reporting. Well, she was trying to make sense of all this stuff, but like the person that passed it on to her was tracking things one way, and they were keeping some stuff in their head, and the other stuff went on the spreadsheet and all that kind of stuff. So today she fashioned a system. It took her all day. She was struggling with it and all that. She's like, oh man, I got it. But she knew, and we discussed that when you're doing something like that, when you're learning Ninpo Taijutsu, when you're right, that hardship is up front. Even in Mikyo, right? In Mikyo, we talk about putting all your eggs in one basket and getting it done now. Then you get back to the party, right? Everything will be taken care of. Okay. So the work is up front. It's like, I don't know, I grew up in the hood, right? Sometimes the toys you had as a poor kid were just shit laying around, right? So fucking tire lying alongside the road. Okay. As a little kid, 7, 8 years old, freaking heavy. So there's all this work in picking this thing up, getting it aligned, moving it, wobbling, all that kind of stuff, and getting some inertia so that then you could just kind of jog or walk quickly next to it and just kind of guide it. But all the work was up front. After that, it becomes guiding. Right? The biggest problem for most people is the upfront work, is the deterrence, no matter how much easier things are going to be later. What they want is easy, fantasizing about being able to deal with hard things. This is actually in the teachings. The training in ninjutsu is supposed to be harder than anything else in the world that you could ever deal with. Yeah, that's not happening for most people. We could have a drive-up window system in the dojo. Right? Laugh about that all the time, don't we, James? Pull up, learn technique. I'd like to learn Musha Dori. All right, pull up to window number 2. Right. Of course, I got them to pay for it at window number 1. Window number 2 has to be like sliding glass doors instead of just a window, right? Because they might order a kick or something, right? So stick your arm out the window. Here it is. Here's the video. Okay. See you next time for the next technique. Okay? I think I'd make a lot of money that way. There'd be a bunch of like hardcore martial arts that'd be pissed off at me, but you know what? Same reason that people get pissed off about the guys that have with this one technique, learn it in 30 minutes and you can defend against any attacker ever. Okay. We may not like it, the fact that they're bullshitting people, but they make a shit ton of money because that's what most people want. That's what most people believe can happen. Can I learn just enough? I don't know. Just enough for what? What kind of attacks are you worried about? How? No. Okay, so you're worried about them, but how might you be attacked? Well, I don't know. Okay, then we need a broad base of skills to be prepared for whatever shows up, not a specific thing. Because I'm a fighter and I sign up for and get involved in certain types of fights, right? You don't see kickboxers getting into ground fighting things or judo matches or whatever, right? I mean, I understand how and why MMA developed, but think about people that niche themselves, right? And I'm not knocking any of those things, right? Everything has benefits, right? But we have to recognize that there's a realm that they operate in, that they work, that they're designed for, right? Because if we're dealing, we think that anything that we do prepares us for self-defense, and not whatever we're doing prepares us for certain types of self-defense situations, then we might think that I can learn boxing and deal with a knife-wielding attacker or somebody with a gun. Well, that's stupid, Sensei. Nobody would ever think that. Okay, well, then stop using the broad term self-defense. Anyway, right. So, anything else while I was meandering there?
Kyle said layers within layers, poems or techniques. There's always more to find if you're willing to look.
Yeah. Some people have to pay attention so they don't miss something as simple as like a birthday over a weekend or something. But anyway, that was an inside joke. He's laughing at the moment. I can hear it across the void. So, but you're right. Absolutely right. Okay. It's like the ogre philosophy, right? From Shrek, right? Ogres are like layer, or they're like parfait. No, they're like onions, not parfait. That was Donkey's thing, right? It's about layers. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I want to add something very important. Okay? Something my first teacher in the art, Stephen Hayes, gave me early on. I don't care what you think of Hayes. I don't care, whatever. Okay. Again, he was my first teacher. Ended up under Hatsumi Sensei after going through a number of the Japanese Shihan, right? But very, very, very early on, what I got was kind of a 3-tiered framework. And this shows up in ninja writings in different ways, right? How nin is explained and those kind of things. But this kind of a 3-tiered framework for how the ninja actually operates, right? Not romantically, not fantasy movies, right? But practically. Okay. There's kind of a priority of preferred action. Okay. And again, remember, my teachers were trained by, ultimately, right, Hatsumi Sensei. Okay. A lot of people used to believe that, and me too, right? So Hatsumi Sensei, like if we look at a ninja families kind of thing, we've got a Jōnin, the high man, right? And then we've got Chunin, middlemen, who are dealing with and whatever, the Geinin, right? Low men. So conventional thought or conventional theory was Hatsumi Sensei is the Jōnin, the teachers are the Chunin, and then all the students are the Geinin. Except that's not the way it works. Historically, Geinin family, right? Geinin, if they're the operational ninja, right? Sneaking into the castles, stealing shit, risking dying, whatever, right? When they teach their kids the skills, those kids learn how to be Geinin. Because that Geinin doesn't know how to be a Chunin or a Jōnin. As a matter of fact, in the clan, he knows maybe 1 or 2 Chunin that he deals with, right? Because they assign him things and he returns the information to them, whether he ever meets them directly or not. But most Geinin didn't know who their leader was, had no idea who the Jōnin in the family was. Okay. Can't rat him out, right? But nobody has choice, right? Children of Geinin learn to be Geinin. Children of Chunin learn to be Chunin. Children of Jōnin learn to be Jōnin. Okay? So if Hatsumi Sensei is a Jōnin, we're all being trained to be warrior philosophers. Jōnin. Okay? But the cool thing is that Jōnin ninjutsu also understands Chunin and Geinin, and you could, if pressed, borrow skills from them. Chunin, not going to be able to do Jōnin stuff, but they could do Geinin stuff. Geinin, do Geinin shit. That's it. That's all there is. Okay? So, but again, if we look at this from a prioritization kind of framework, right, the ninja sets up his life so that no one ever considers him a target. That's not technique. That's positioning. Okay? So the highest level of ninjutsu, the highest level of nin, is to set up your life so that you never end up on the radar of attackers. You could incidentally, because you just happen to be in a certain place or time where that area, right? But to be targeted, to be seen as a threat, to be neutralized, that kind of stuff, never happens. Okay, that's the ideal. But again, it's not technique. It's positioning. It's influence. Okay? When we can't do that, right? When danger can't be prevented, then the ninja avoids it through escape, right? Through de-escalation, those kind of things, right? Before it ever touches him or her. Okay? So this is movement. This is timing. This is distraction. This is misdirection. Right? And third, and only when there is no other option, right? The ninja defends himself. This is not preference. This is necessity. This is last resort. Okay? Now, here's the part that most people miss. And I did for a long time because I was just parroting what the teacher said. Okay? If the ideal is to set up our lives so that the attacker never shows up, right? And fighting is last, why are students taught fighting first? See? If we never ask the question, we can't go deep enough to get the answer. Right? If we just assume that whatever the lesson is, well, that's what the lesson is, and then, but now we're stuck. Right? We start training with physical self-defense, not because it's ideal, but because it takes the longest to develop reliably. To actually be able to use it outside the dojo, not fall back on something else, right? Against somebody or somebodies who want to beat, break, or kill you. It's going to take the longest. Also, new students coming in, awareness is not what it could be or should be. Athleticism, anything like that, right? So chances are the attack and or the attacker is going to be right in front of them long before they ever recognize that they had an opportunity for influence. And for a lot of people, based on the way they were raised, right? I know I was, right? Based on programming, based on just listening to adults talk and all that, right? This is life. Can't have your cake and eat it too. What are you going to do about it? Just life, powers that be are always going to be using you. Whatever. Talk about like growing up believing in nothing but without having a caste system. We had a caste system, right? Born into a family of blue collar laborers, therefore that's what we do. Those are the only jobs available or less, nothing more, right? Because somebody else is keeping us down. And then I learned that that wasn't true. And so now I have family members that resent me or Well, no, it's still resentment because they go, oh, look who has the money, or look who's on vacation again, or look who thinks he's all that. I don't think I'm all that. Personally, I don't think any of us are all that special. We're all easy to kill, right? And we can get over ourselves. That's when potential opens up. But as long as we think we're fill in the blank, okay, that's where we anchor ourselves down. Okay? Doctors are just as stuck. Lawyers are just as stuck. They could be stuck with more money, but they're just as stuck. Same heart problem, same blood pressure problem, same nagging wife problem, same or nagging husband problem, whatever. Same kids that don't fucking like you problem, whatever. Right? Life doesn't go away because of a job title or amount of money. Right? So they don't have those abilities. So not only does physical technique and proficiency take longer to develop, right? So does getting somebody to see the importance of not talking about being aware, but actually working on Zanshin and actually working on being more aware in their lives. Okay. We don't yet have our lives structured in a way that removes us from target lists. Right? We don't have a control over ourselves. We're not self-aware enough that we have this twitch or this facial expression or this tone when it's a certain type of person, or they dress a certain way, or they have a certain job title, or we're feeling a certain way, or whatever, where either we don't realize or we don't give a shit that we're coming across in a disrespectful way. And then there's an underlying belief system that laws will protect me from this person attacking me because he'll go to jail if he cares. Right? So since we don't have that kind of control, right? And we don't have the perception to see danger early enough, so we build physical capability first, at least evasion, at least grab escape, those kind of things, right? We add escape, we add evasion, we add distraction, right? And these skills form the bridge between Jōnin and Jōnin. Okay? They reduce reliance on force. They buy time. They preserve choice. Right? And over time, if the training is real, it's the whole purpose for KUDEN. If the training is real, something else happens. The scroll says that at the Jōnin level, at the Oku-den level, we become invisible in the eyes of the enemy. This is not fantasy. We're not literally invisible. We are informationally invisible. We're just not a good target. We go from being a hard target, hard to hurt, to just another one of the little gray people in an attacker's life that doesn't stand out as somebody worth their time, effort, or energy. Right? Or, because in my position, in Hatsumi Sensei's position, in any teacher's position where everybody knows that you're a martial artist, you're a teacher, you've got these skills, whatever. What keeps you safe from somebody who has a frickin' chip on their shoulder who wants to try you out? Okay? At one level, they're these, we call them dojo invaders. Some jackass comes in off the street, wants to do a trial class, but really wants to just wipe the floor with the instructor's ass, so they've got bragging rights. What stops that from happening? What stops that from happening is developing oneself in a way where they've got the skills, but they look soft. They've got the skills and the awareness, but so he's got this level black belt, or he's got this title, But he's fat. Like, Ninja can't be fat, right? Or he's got all these weapons, but they're all these like old traditional things. I mean, like, he doesn't carry a gun, does he? I've never seen him carry a knife or even talk about having one. Okay, so the alternate in this realm is a potential attacker never has the certainty, never has the clarity or the timing or whatever required to mount a reliable attack. They're left with no confidence, no commitment, no opening. Okay, again, no certainty. So the storm never fully forms. Right? That is Nin at its highest level. Because the information they're getting is conflicting. They're never on solid ground to be able to launch the attack. They could, but they don't know what they're going to run into. And that is scarier than knowing that it'll be a good fight and we'll see what happens and I could still lose. Not knowing what you're going to run into, for most people, it's a risk they're not willing to take. Okay. So let's roll this into something. I've been alluding to this, and for those of you on Facebook and connected to my stuff and whatever, I just recently shared something that Sean Askew, one of the historians within the Bujinkan, posted over the New Year's, talking about the Togakushi, the Iyama region, Shinano, I think, that region around Togakushi, right? With old school was called Togakude Mountain. Now in today's world, it's called Togakushi, right? That whole region, right, is an example and proof that this mindset isn't abstract philosophy. It's deeply embedded, even in the it's easily seen in the traditional New Year observances in that whole region, right, and the areas surrounding it. Okay. Translations and commentary, including work by Sean, right, point to things like New Year prayers and festivals and whatnot that are not about luck or comfort, but about continuity. They're about proper positioning. They're about avoiding wasted effort in the year ahead. They're about having the insight and intention to not let important things slip by so they could be prepared should something happen. But if you go to that region, it looks very quiet. It looks very, it looks every day, right? Just like people going through their days. But see, there's the assumption, right, that hardship will come. There's a very interesting quote, right? I think everybody knows it, right? This too shall pass. Right? Part of my geek side is Star Trek. Okay? And so I was fresh out of the Army a bunch of now decades ago. And I had gone to, my dad and I, actually, one of our better moments, went to a Star Trek convention that was local. And I met Tom Delancey. He played this character Q in The Next Generation. And I mean, he's acted in all kinds of things or whatever, but he was this mischievous, devious kind of character, whatever. But so this Star Trek calendar had come out and it was for sale. Right? One of the little money-making things they did. And so during one of his little presentations, because everybody goes to meet the celebrities and stuff like that, right? And so during one of his presentations, he was talking about this calendar, right? And he was asked to contribute a quote. So everybody, based on their character, would have, had a little quote in there that would have fit the Star Trek universe and whatnot. And most actors just borrowed something from script that everybody would have recognized. Okay. And he did not. Okay. And it was the coolest moment because the full quote, and I don't have the full quote in front of me, for "This too shall pass" is about, I'm going to borrow this poem from the Shinobi thing, right? Okay. So the winds and the waves and the storms and whatever, right? This too shall pass, right? That's the normal context that most people learn that in, right? You're going through trouble. Okay. I get it. Hold on. This too shall pass. But in the calendar, which I have no idea, right, where it is, as this character Q, he had something in there that was more fitting of this character and this dark humor and whatnot. And so his quote was something more like, the sunshine, the flowers, the touch of your loved one's face, this too shall pass. And anybody that avoids that side, the dark side of the yin yang or whatever, is not in touch with reality. They want to be in touch with the nice stuff, but that's infant lessons. Okay. Instead of assuming that we can avert all catastrophe, which is how most human beings operate, right? I have insurance, so now I'm protected. Trust me, I've gone through 2 fires. Yep, your stuff is not protected. And if you think you're getting back everything at full value of what you lost, you're higher than a tweaker that has no idea where they are. Okay. That's not pessimism. That's having been through it a couple of times. Okay. Your shit's not protected. It will still burn. It will still get destroyed by water damage. It will still, all the stuff that, there's stuff you can't imagine that will happen. Right. So it's not protected. So people keep, but they want the world to be comfortable and safe and easy. It's always somebody else's job to do the protection. It's always somebody else's job to do the hard stuff. It's always somebody else's job to, otherwise I resent it. Otherwise it pisses me off. Otherwise, whatever, right? But from the ninja's perspective, we prepare because the assumption is that hardship will come. Okay? The prayer is not like Western prayers, protect us from these things. In that region, the prayer is that nothing essential is lost. And what we mean by lost is missed. Nothing essential is missed so that we can be as prepared as possible. Not ready. Ready's a feeling. Okay? We know about feelings, right? Facts don't care about your feelings. Okay? We can be as prepared as possible to weather the storm, to get past that point until the winds ease, the waves calm, the skies open up. We get, right? That's the difference. Okay? So, returning to the poem, right? If you're in the dojo or you're on for Ninpo Mastermind or one of the Ninpo Mastery or Elite training programs, right? And the camera's facing right at the kamiza, right? When you look at that scroll, it's not telling you to suffer bravely. It's reminding you that when you stop wasting yourself, when you stop fighting for the sake of honor and the good fight and all that kind of stuff, right? The storm loses its leverage. When you study and train, and part of your preparation is to understand the storm, to understand the nature of the storm, to understand the nature of different types of attacks and attacker personalities and preferences and things like that, right? Those things lose their leverage. Okay. That doesn't make the attack any less brutal. It doesn't make it any less violent. It doesn't mean that you're going to survive every one. It loses its leverage. It loses its advantage. You're more prepared. Okay. And that's why the line that ties all of this together is simple, but it's exact, it's precise. Nin is not about enduring pain. It's about enduring long enough for choice, options to return. That's Fudo. That's Ninpo. That's Jōnin Oku-den level living. And that, my friends, is the lesson hidden in plain sight. And thus endeth the lesson. So, James, questions, comments, complaints? Broad shoulders.
Victor said, I'm still alive, pun intended.
Good. Intend your puns. Right. I'm going to buy one of those T-shirts that say, I intend my puns, right? Those who don't are cowards. Awesome. Is that it?
Dave said as well, layers and keys, even just within the names of the kata.
Absolutely. There's a lot of shit hidden in those. Right? Anybody that has any of the quest videos by Hatsumi Sensei? Oh, the amount of little tidbits that are hidden in the little summary on the back. Cool shit.
And then Dave also said it's why the most lethal stuff is first, since less lethal options are more difficult to pull off and require more skill.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely. They do. Okay. And I understand the omote that you're coming at it from, where it's more lethal because you're doing it, right? It's a skill that you're doing. Okay. But don't forget that a Jōnin gets somebody to kill themselves, or a Chunin gets somebody to do the killing. Right. So no blood in your hands, no evidentiary trail back to you. Right. Here's Jōnin training hidden in plain sight for our youth students that I think adults could benefit from as well. Okay. When parents come in, as a part of the information packet we give them, there is a little brochure. It's you can get it through the website too. But it's in more report form that way. But it's called Child Safety 24/7. I know, tricky name, right? But in there's little things about confusion parents could have, like if my kid does martial arts or whatever, wanting to be more violent and stuff like that. And the reality is that in all but the rarest of cases, the opposite's actually true, right? There's a bunch of things in there, but there is a panel which gives their children that they should work over with them and explain. And we talk about it in class sometimes and all that. But it's 12 ways to beat the bully without fighting. Okay? And the very first one is, I think it's the very first one. It's make friends with the bully. And it shocks everybody because, the assumption is if I make friends with the bully, I run the risk of becoming just like them. And that's true, which is why Seishin Teki Kyoyo, spiritual refinement, and staying focused on the goal. Why am I doing it? Not befriending them just so, on the omote side, I don't get targeted. Because bullies don't attack their friends. The bully and their friends attack, right? It's like fucking pack mentality, right? So on the obvious side, I'm less likely to be attacked because I'm in friend mode, not stranger, outsider, target mode. But the Uda side of that lesson that the kids learn is people are more likely to take advice from and listen to their friends and the people close to them than they are outsiders. So bullies are more likely to listen to their friends than they are to teachers, authority figures, worry about punishment, right? They'll just do it when nobody's looking, that kind of stuff. Or maybe they're willing to take the punishment, right? Maybe they're being bullied by a parent at home, right? And this is just a way to kind of patch the equilibrium. But from a position in friend mode, the student now has the ability to influence the thoughts, words, and actions of the bully. And to most people, it doesn't make any sense. But that is tune in to Jōnin level operation. Right? Interesting, yeah? Why do we give them 12? Not 3, not 1, whatever? Because nothing on there is guaranteed to work. And we don't stop at having a backup or 2 backups. It's just like in the Bujinkan, right? We have 9 lineages. That Hatsumi Sensei had Soke ship too. The Bujinkan is also imbued with other lineages that he trained in, and things came in from those as well. Okay? So we have way more options. Okay? Where most people are good at a thing. Some people are good at a thing with a backup. Very few people have a secondary backup. If you go through this training seriously and you go through and you understand the different lineages, right, you could start in one realm, one strategic solution to that, solving that particular problem. And if it's not working, you can change. And if that doesn't work, you can change again. And if that doesn't work, most attackers can't keep up. But the cool thing is that several of the lineages are more about influence and manipulation, right? Influence and invisibility and things like that. So that you're actually influencing your realm, influencing your sphere, just call it your sphere of influence, right? In ways long before the attacker ever shows up, and when done properly, influences who or if ever anyone will show up. It's very different. So again, on Wednesday, we're going to focus in on Hira, because I really want to look at an influence thing, right? And I really want to focus in on this Jōnin idea, this Oku-den idea of not being the reason that the storm is happening. Right? So we'll be exploring the Sanmitsu, the triple secrets of success, the 3 mysteries, thought, word, and deed. We'll be exploring this Hira no Kamae, the kanji, but more specifically, we're going to be exploring how it is at the pivotal point that is the deciding factor as to whether the storm ever forms or the storm ever becomes as strong or as forceful as it could be, where we're able to deal with things in a way where we can focus on what needs to be done, but at the same time, we never lose choice. We never lose options. Okay? And we leave him without confidence, without ground, without certainty. It's one of the most overlooked, if not most discarded, kamae. Once somebody doesn't need it for testing anymore, never fucking use it again. Because they don't understand it. Because they're filtering this art through a fighter's mentality. Which is why they're going to have a hard time touching, let alone understanding ninjutsu, let alone ninpo. Okay. But we're going to make sure that doesn't happen to us, right? Okay. All right. Last chance. Questions, comments, James, anything?
No.
We're through Daikomyo Sai. Oh, don't forget. I didn't get a chance to do it today, but I will. I know I set 5 o'clock yesterday as the deadline for the video recordings for Daikomyo Sai. James, about how long do you think it's going to take to do that quick edit to get those things out to people?
I'm hoping to have them out like end of the week.
Okay, so let's do this. I'm not going to go to end of the week. We'll call it. I'll close everything down because I didn't get a chance to do it yet. Doors are still open. Even though if you go to the web page, I think the timers run out and all that kind of stuff. But I think that the buttons are still active. Let's say class time on Wednesday. That because I'll do whiteboard Wednesday. That ends about 4 or whatever. That gives me time to do things as I need to before classes and our team meeting beats into things. So yeah, well, I'll leave the doors open until 5 o'clock on Wednesday, 5 o'clock Eastern, right? Do the calculation. If you want them, great. If you're a technique collector, don't get them. It'll just piss you off, and then I'll get pissed off because you'll be pissed off and want money back or whatever. Okay. It is about seeing and exploiting things before, during, and after techniques, both physically, perceptually, mentally, biomechanically, all kinds of things. 7 0 points out of a much longer list that I could have pulled from, but 7 0 points. And I also, James, that's uploaded, right? So I promised everybody during the weekend that I would turn that the 7, actually 8 0 points into into kind of a guide, not really a worksheet, but a guide. There are a couple of spots on there for notes. And I also included, because the first thing I did Friday night as we opened things up was to find the Daikomyo of Daikomyo Sai and how that should be seen. Not just it's about Hatsumi Sensei's birthday and whatever. Daikomyo, great light, actually refers to this whole idea of enlightened wisdom and the ability to apply things in a way, right? But there's a definition in there. There's an explanation of the Daikomyo that points to my job, any instructor's job, anyone that's not trying to surround themselves with disciples. I don't need disciples. I have enough problems trying to manage myself. Yeah, but if you get it, like all the folks that were there and who pre-ordered already are going to get that guide. If you get in, then it'll be there. Okay. I'll open things up here I got a couple of emails that'll go out or whatever as reminders, but yeah, no later than 5 o'clock on Wednesday, and then that's it. Wrap it up. Okay. I think that's it. James, anything else that you can think of? We'll be posting dates for spring camp, fall camp. For those of you who have been asking about Japan, I was going to do things in April, but Japan's biggest freaking holiday week was really close to where I was going to go, and travel would be a pain in the ass. So I'm actually moving the trip to Japan into May, but I've got to get past my granddaughter's graduation kind of things and all that. So it's probably going to be middle of May, I think. But I don't want to push it too far because summer and humidity and monsoon season and shit like that starts kicking in. So anyway, but I'll have those things out as well. So spring camp, fall camp, Japan trip. Yeah. So if you want in, great. I think I got based on the people who are wanting to go now, out of 9 spots, I got 7 left. So not counting me. All right. Anybody, anything else? Any last minute under the wire? No?
No, sir.
All right. In that case, I will talk to everybody again next time. Hopefully, I'll see you on Wednesday or on one of the classes or whatever. And if not, I'll see you next week on KUDEN.
Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.